The following is a presentation of the Retro Network.
Remember that show back then? Remember that show? Turn on the TV, time was always flying. Why did they have to end? So many shows you forgotten. Now that we've got a podcast, we can release all the shows from our hands. Yeah, will you be the most TV dudes you'll ever listen to? As long as we keep on talking sitcoms and cartoons from back in the day. Okay, we confess we're obsessed, but we got a podcast to help you remember that show. You say you've been waiting a whole month for more retro TV fun and you can't wait another minute? Not a problem. You better believe it, TV lovers. We're back with episode 4 of Remember That Show, and we're ready to achieve maximum coolness. I am one of your flamingo-loving co-hosts, Adam Pope.
And I'm William Bruce West. Before we start, let me just see what I have packed in my magic trench coat here. Microphone, cellular phone, megaphone, gramophone. Yep, we're good to go. In fact, I've been good to go since we announced this episode last time around. Parker Lewis Can't Lose is not a totally forgotten show, but it has never officially streamed anywhere. See, you want to count Crackle, which makes it obscure and perfect for the podcast.
Yeah, totally agree. You know, I've been watching my DVD copies, enjoying every minute, only to find out that, okay, you can find some episodes on YouTube. You can find all the episodes on archive.org. Did I need to spend the money on the DVDs? I think so. There's commentaries. I get nice crisp picture, but either way, I love this show and I have, since it was airing originally. So we will get into that soon enough. But before we jump back into that world of loud silk shirts and 90s hairstyles, it's time to look back at our own days studying TV history as we play our theme song. So this is one of those shows, Will. I mean, it's all about high school. And so I have to ask you, if you could attend any 80s or 90s television school, it could be elementary school, it could be, a high school, it could be a college, which learning institution would you choose to enroll at?
This one's tough. This one's really tough because a problem I always had with those shows is that unless you're in the group that the show revolves around, the principal only cares about that group. It's like Belding at Bayside, Mr. Feeney, like, what about these other students? So thinking about it, I would like to be at Millard Fillmore High School in Manhattan, but I would have to be a part of the Individualized Honors Program, also known as the IHP, and that is from head of the class. I mean, they got to do smart kid stuff, even though it wasn't really an intense magnet program. They got to go to the Soviet Union. It was back in a time when we weren't really just casually going to the Soviet Union, and I kind of relate to that. So I don't know, I always had a special spot in my heart. I feel like if I went to Fillmore, I would have gotten in the IHP.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, definitely. Plus, Robin Givens is going to be there. You're going to see Simone. I don't know the actress that played Simone, but
yeah, I don't think she ever did anything else other than maybe some Lifetime movies.
This is the one I thought I was going to be stealing from you. Most people would think it'd be for a different reason, but I was going to say Angel Grove High School. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, that's where they went. And you would think, okay, yeah, he wants an opportunity to be considered a teenager with attitude. He's going to get a Morpher. He's going to get a Zord. His life is going to be cool. But that's not it. The reason is, if I'm one of the other students there, we're probably only going to class a month total out of each year because there's giant monsters attacking pretty much every day. And so you have to go in a bomb shelter and hide out until the Power Rangers take care of it. So that's more time to go home and watch TV. So that's my thought.
Plus, if your dad's an insurance adjuster, you're the richest kid in town. Well, anyway, Adam, during your high school days, did you ever experience any fellow students or crazy goings-on that seemed right out of a teen sitcom?
Now, sometimes that's like the frame of mind. When you're a TV-loving kid, you see the world as a sitcom, right? You see people as characters. And my freshman year, having, watched Saved by the Bell for all the years leading up to high school, the Zach Morris of my school was a senior. His name was Dan Van Voris, which is just the best name, right? Dan Van Voris. And he was like this fast-talking kind of schemer guy. He always had a little glint in his eye. He was always up to something. But he was elected to deliver the school announcements over the PA system each week, but he ran it like a drive time morning radio show, and he would wrap up each session with like a top 10 list that was actually funny and like relevant to the school. He had his sign off, he had all these things. I mean, really, I think I learned a lot about podcasting before that was a thing from listening to his announcements. But most important to me that made it feel like a sitcom is he turned Dr. Schmelzer, who was our principal, she was a rather large-framed woman. She was his antagonist. He would like do playful jabs at her. Like he once told the joke where he mentioned her being cast on Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. I just remember cracking up. And I was like, you can't do that. She's going to come after you. So it was also like the corniest sitcom style joke, right? And so it just really fit into my whole perception of him. But he was just like my hero. He was very cool to me. He pulled me into like our improv team and drama and all these other things. And so the next year I ran for the same position and I lost out to two really annoying people whose comedy did not mesh well together. They had to share the position. I was like, maybe it's best I didn't win, but I won the next year. And then I got to do the announcements. I've been planning it. My antagonist of sorts, kind of love interest antagonist that I was playing up on the air, we had our student government advisor, Miss Parham, was like only like 25 or something, and she was like cute and everything. So I jokingly asked her out to a school dance over the PA, was comedically shut down on the air. It was great, So it was just like I got to be that person and I got to idolize that person who just seemed like they stepped out of TV. But what about for you, Will? Any wacky happenings?
Always. I mean, like you were saying, when you grow up with TV, you think like you're a TV-minded person, your world, you have your like crew and your cast of characters. Every school year was a new season, like is that kind of, you got new supporting cast members, some left the show, contract disputes, we got some new ones in there, got a little diversity in there. Like everybody was a character, honestly. Like I've always said, like my life was an adventure until I hit like 25, and then it just got boring. But like more characters and wackiness than we've even got time for tonight.
I'm sure. And that reminds me, actually, my sophomore year, it was so strange. We had these like two new kids that moved in, and one was this rich girl from Beverly Hills who was all sass and attitude, and the other was this like flamboyantly gay kid. And they were just like, they dominated like the drama department and everything for that year. They got leads and everything, and then they both moved the next year. It's like they got their own show somewhere.
Right.
It was awesome. I mean, but yeah, that's 100% how you think about it. But then we would actually turn on the TV, and that was influencing those thoughts. And so now we got to find out what the path was that was laid on this entertainment landscape of the late 80s and early 90s for Parker Lewis Can't Lose to get the green light.
Well, we've talked about Beverly Hills 90210 in the past as a show that set the table for the young hot people-based soap opera boom that dominated the 90s. But Parker Lewis Can't Lose arrived on the scene in a pre-90210 world with a very different tone. Though Saved by the Bell premiered the year before on NBC Saturday mornings, there was nothing like Parker Lewis on the primetime schedule in 1990. Truth be told, this series owes much more to cult high school comedy feature films like 3 O'Clock High or Better Off Dead than the adventures of Zach Morris and friends on the small screen. Though it's also hard to deny the inspiration of the classic Looney Tunes shorts, given all the visual gags and sound effects present in the series. Honestly, the show is probably more inspiring than inspired by. For example, a show like The Adventures of Pete and Pete feels very Parker Lewis in its surreal and bizarre storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those shows where you look at it, you're like, wow, I can't put it in a box. I can't really categorize it. Although I think a lot of people, when it was on the air and when they think back, they point to the John Hughes iconic teen film Ferris Bueller's Day Off. They think that was the inspiration for the series. I think that is what got it the green light. But remember, that was the 80s. And this is like, 4 years later. I mean, this is a while that it was in development with Clyde Phillips, and he was the guy kind of putting it all together. But when you think about it, Parker Lewis, yes, he's a confident and clever schemer. He's at odds with his principal and his little sister. That sounds like Ferris Bueller, but I would argue that the similarities really stop there. Because first of all, Parker Lewis, he doesn't break the fourth wall by talking directly to the camera. Melissa Joan Hart on Clarissa Explains It All would be much more Ferris Bueller inspired in that way. But he does everything via voiceover, so maybe it's more Wonder Years, even though it's not an older version of Parker Lewis as far as we know doing the voiceover. Actually, later in second season, they reveal that it's a daily diary he does into an audio cassette recorder. So we do understand that. But then also Parker, he's never tried to like ditch school or selfishly slack off with his scheming. Like, he likes being in school. He's kind of the top dog there. He's trying to fight against the system in order to help other people out, whether it's his friends or just other students he sees having a hard time. So like, I really think as characters, they're very opposite. Like, there's a slight similarity there. But what do you think, Will? Do you agree or disagree?
I definitely agree. I mean, to sort of set the table on what was going on here, people sort of forget that Parker Lewis launched the same time as the Ferris Bueller TV adaptation on NBC that didn't have John Hughes' involvement. And like, looking back at that, it's sort of reminiscent of the 30 Rock versus Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip battle, because in both cases, the underdog won. People assumed Ferris Bueller was gonna be the hit because it's the adaptation of this popular movie, Same with Studio 60, you had this like Aaron Sorkin created behind the scenes look of a late night sketch show, and then you've got Tina Fey, who, yeah, she was head writer of SNL, but like, she didn't have the television pedigree of an Aaron Sorkin. And Studio 60 got one season, and Ferris Bueller got one season, And I think when you're really like comparing and contrasting the characters, Ferris is an a-hole. Like, he really is. And Charlie Schlatter, who portrayed him in the TV show, his biggest sin was he wasn't an endearing a-hole, which Broderick somehow pulled off. But you got to remember, this was before he killed that family.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, he didn't have any controversy. He was beloved from War Games and everything else up to that point. So yeah, it's the first association, but I think as we talk more and more about the show, you're going to see just how different Parker Lewis is from Ferris Bueller in pretty much every way.
Definitely. But now it's time to go deeper into what the show is all about as we give you the elevator pitch. Parker Lewis Can't Lose deals with the high school adventures of a student named Parker Lewis, played by Corin Nemec, his best buds rock and roller Mikey, played by William Jane, and the awkward freshman genius Jerry, played by Troy Slayton. The trio navigate the troubles created for them by the dictatorial Principal Grace Musso, played by Melanie Chartoff, and her fiendish student assistant Frank Limmer, played by Taj Johnson. Also in the mix are gentle giant and force of nature Larry Kubiak, played by Abraham Ben-Ruby, Parker's jealous little sister Shelley, played by Maya Bruton, and Parker's parents, who run the Mondo video rental store. The series ran for 3 seasons on Fox from 1990 to 1993 and was one of the early successes for the network.
Yeah, this is definitely, a show that was packed with great performers, but they weren't household names, but they really stood out in a big way. Now, I will say, as the show develops, in the second season, Parker gets a long-term, serious girlfriend named Annie. That relationship continues all the way to the end of the third season, which was renamed to just Parker Lewis. I don't know why Can't Lose felt like it was old or dated. They needed just a name, but they went with that. And they also added Rotunda shunned stand-up comedian John Panette as a regular to the cast, playing Hank Kohler, who is a PE coach that's romantically obsessed, you would say, with Miss Musso. I do have to say, I loved John Panette on that series, and then I remember going and buying his CD, his stand-up CD, Show Me the Buffet. And then I got to go see him live in the early 2000s before he passed away. And that was just like a special night for me. I'd never seen stand-up before live, and I'm like, yay, I love you. Anyway, it's worth mentioning that the series also had a ton of celebrity cameos throughout its run. So you had like rockers like Tom Petty, Ozzy Osbourne, Tammy Down from the Sunset Strip hairband Faster Pussycat. Like, all these guys showed up for quick gags, but so did fellow Fox teen stars like David Faustino, and he was basically playing Bud Bundy, like he references that. The entire cast of Beverly Hills 90210. And most exciting to me, though, Tiffany Brissett, aka Vicky from Small Wonder, is one of Shelley's friends in an episode. I was like, I can't believe it, because she did so little outside of Small Wonder. So when she pops up, you're like, woohoo! And also, well, I noticed this as like I said, I've just been watching the series straight through. 2 separate cast members from the first season of Charles in Charge, 2 of the Pembroke kids were on it. So Lila and Douglas, who was also the older brother in Mac and Me, both made an appearance. Lila especially jumped out to me because I had a huge crush on her as a kid, and she plays Parker's girlfriend for one episode. She's like, I have to let you go so you can be with your buds. It's great. Anyway, but also Mila Jovovich is the love interest in the pilot. Brittany Murphy guest starred in an episode in the early days of her career as well. Like, is there anybody else that you're aware of?
Oh, definitely. The one that really stuck out to me, because I didn't go through it straight like you did. I jumped around. I wanted a sampling of each season. So I was watching, in season 2, there's Dance of Romance, when Limmer falls for like this mysterious kind of goth girl, but it's like we wouldn't even know to call her goth then. But what stuck out to me, like when I saw her, I'm like, that chick is familiar. And it's Juliet Landau, who plays Drusilla in Buffy, and she's essentially playing Drusilla. Like, if you like kind of put them together, it's like Drusilla before Spike turned her. Or maybe she turned Spike. I forget. Some Buffy person's gonna jump on me for that. But she was one of my favorite Buffy characters. So when I saw that, I was like, wow. And then I also noticed the Mia Jovovich thing. And then there's some other people that I'll jump into later.
Yeah, I mean, it really is one of those shows, though, that when you go back and watch it now, you're like, okay, this person went on to this. Like, even like one of the guys from Nightmare on Elm Street 3 shows up in there. And I'm like, what? Joey? You know, one of the Dream Warriors is in this? So yeah, you just never know who's going to show up on the show, but it was truly kind of unique for its time in the way that it tapped into the pop culture, and obviously we're excited about it. So I say we synchronize swatches and give out our cheers. So as far as what I liked, I'm just going to say this, that I'm going to give to you everything. The show is so up my alley. It is insane. Like, it's hard even to know where to start. So I'm curious, just give me one of yours and maybe we'll go back and forth here. What is like the thing that jumps out to you?
Oh man, there's a lot, because I loved it too. To me, there's this thing I carry with me. There's something I consider to be like the quintessential Fox show. It's funny, like you'll find out a show was developed for one network and then ends up in another one, and you can kind of tell, or at least I can, because it doesn't fit the personality of the network. Like, this was developed for CBS, but CBS turned it down, so then it was like retooled, redeveloped, ended up on Fox. This to me is the quintessential early 90s Fox show. It is as Fox can get. And like, I just have a special place in my heart for that era. Like, everything about it. I mean, Fox Sunday nights. This is before Simpsons moved there. It's still on Thursdays at this point. You've got every show when it starts. It's in stereo where available, in cursive. You know, like, I mean, the series finale has like a snippet of Studs in it. This takes me back to like my special place. Like, I'm coming to the realization lately that I'm not really a child of the 80s. Like, it took me a long time to really get to that point, but like the 90s is really when things started like mattering to me, because I was in a completely different place than my peers in the 80s. So like, this is Fox to me. Like, even as it evolved into like world's craziest murderous bears, or like the reality stuff, or Masked Singer now, this to me is like the snow globe that captures the essence of Fox.
Oh, absolutely. I do have to ask though. So my recollection all these years, and I don't know if I was catching it in reruns, but this was a primetime series, but I remember catching it on like Saturday afternoons, like when the Bill and Ted live action series was airing as well. Like it would be like Bill and Ted and Parker Lewis. But I mean, maybe I was watching it at night, but in my memory, it was always afternoons. So you remember tuning in Sunday nights and checking it out?
Oh, definitely Sunday night. And it was like early Sunday night. Like it was never after 8. I want to say it was even like in that 7 o'clock slot, but I know that gets kind of tricky when Fox got football, so don't quote me there, but it basically kicked off Sunday night. It was like the family part. It would always be like Parker Lewis and maybe True Colors, or like Parker Lewis, and even one I watched today on YouTube was like, coming up next, Shaky Ground, like that was the block it was in. And then you would shift into like the adult stuff at 9, which was Married with Children and Duets, or Married with Children. That predates Parker Lewis, but that was kind of like how Fox treated Sunday night at 9. Yeah, okay. Definitely I was watching it first run.
Got it. Okay. Well, now the thing that stands out to me that really made it special is that the series is shot single camera, which was pretty rare for a sitcom at that time, and shot on location. It's outdoors, it's indoors, but it was in a physical, actual high school they were filming at. And so it feels like a mini movie each week. Every episode felt like, oh, this is like a production. And so to me, what really stands out is there's a beginning, a middle, and an end that's unique to every single story. There isn't necessarily a formula. There's lots of running gags, there's catchphrases, there's signature jokes for each character, but it never feels repetitive. You never know actually what is going to happen next, because it could just take a genre turn, suddenly experimental, and I'm just like, this thing is amazing. But it's literally anything goes. Like Jerry might pull a fax machine out of his coat, or suddenly be crawling on the ceiling to escape danger, or Coob, might become an intimidating security guard for Mondo Video, or have a nerdy freshman living in his stomach because he ate him. Like Mikey might play his guitar on top of the school, or play his guitar sitting on a motorcycle at the beach. Mikey didn't have a lot of range. Mikey, they didn't do much with, okay? But again, the unpredictability of the gags, because if you looked at them, it was a standard, like, Saved by the Bell high school plot. If you just look at, like, the basic description, this is what's going to happen in the episode. But the tiniest gag, the tiniest everything, like, made it completely unique, and nothing you could say, oh yeah, well, I've seen that before. You're like, no, you haven't seen this before.
Exactly. I have that in my notes. I put it down as like the plot swerve, that like it didn't always have a sitcom ending. It didn't always go where you expected it to wrap up in 22 minutes. Like, two things jump out at me about that. There's an episode in season 2 where it becomes more of an ensemble show. It's less just around Parker, but like the supporting cast is huge at that point. And they bring in Nick, who works at the Atlas Diner. And Nick's giving advice to everyone, and his advice just makes everyone fall in love. But you find out that, like, Nick's powers are weakened when he can't find love himself. So he's really pursuing one of the teachers at the high school, and she's just not interested. And he really, like, turns on the charm, and meanwhile, he's trying to, like, coach Limmer into how to pursue prototypical Drusilla, because it's that same episode. In a typical sitcom fashion, or as Steve Urkel has taught us, he would have worn down that teacher and eventually gotten her in the end, but he doesn't. She's not interested. He has to realize that, but then there's this other woman who comes completely out of nowhere who's perfect for him, and it's like, oh, this has been in front of me the whole time. So like that was one thing. And then the series finale, which I hope we get to talk about, but like it's ultimately a clip show, because it's one of those deals like you knew they weren't coming back, but they really didn't have anything in the can. Plus, this predates the era where you had to end on a cliffhanger, or even had to have some like grandiose series finale. So in that situation, I thought it was fitting, but what stands out about that episode, they're trying to close down the Atlas Diner. At this point, John Panette runs the diner. They need to save the diner. It's the typical save the youth center plot from like every 80s movie, and they don't save it. Like, like you expect some like 11th hour kind of like salvation. Oh, the Atlas is saved. No, the Atlas is not saved. Like the wrecking crew comes, the power goes out. They even kind of flash forward a little bit where there's like stagnant water in the parking lot. Goodbye. It's almost as dark as the dinosaurs ending in some ways, like, and that's our final taste of Parker Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how they dared to take so many chances and just say, nope, we're doing it differently. But the thing you mentioned there is that it really is an ensemble show. And it is cast perfectly. It's like the lightning in a bottle. It's like Friends, where it's just like the chemistry between everybody. Every actor knows their character. The writers consistently create specific jokes for each character's personality. The timing and the delivery of the jokes, like everybody's in sync. It's not generic dialogue that just anybody could slip into and make work. Like it had to be these actors with their unique delivery. If any one of them had been off, the show just would have collapsed immediately, and it doesn't. Like everybody is on point. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that, just some of the characters, because, for example, we mentioned this earlier. Parker Lewis could have so easily been the smarmy, self-centered Zach Morris type, and he's not. I mean, he legitimately likes his friends, unlike Zach Morris, who is using all his friends and calling his best friend supposedly Screech an idiot every episode. He's concerned for their well-being. And in fact, most of the plots, at least in the early seasons, season and a half, I'd say, revolve around him seeing someone else having a difficult time and trying to figure out how he can help using his unique set of skills, which is what? He has a complex video surveillance system set up all over the school. He can see everything at all times. He's recording everything at all times, it seems. But also, everybody just likes him. So he can call in favors because he's a nice guy who helps people out all the time. And so he's like, oh yeah, this person needs this. Oh yeah, we'll hook him up. But he's a schemer, but not a devious one. And he might play pranks even on his sister, but that's usually in retaliation for her trying to sabotage him. And he's just one step ahead.
He's the equalizer, but of friendship, like he's not killing people. He uses his unique set of skills to help his friends.
Yeah, he's not like trying to mentally destroy the people who come in as an antagonist or humiliate them, really. He's a genuinely good guy who's just like, let's be reasonable here. Let's kind of keep the peace. And that was very rare for sitcom characters at this time. He's such an ideal that you didn't see. It's like everybody was allowed to be jerks back then. I want to ask your thoughts on Miss Musso, though. Melanie Chardoff is amazing.
I wrote this on Twitter back in May, and I'm pretty sure I've written it several times in the past 15 years I've been on Twitter, but Miss Musso has a weird sexuality that I'd never seen before, and I have never seen since. There were certain things growing up, like I grew up with the Golden Girls. Yeah, Blanche sleeps around, but it's kind of like a humorous thing, and like she's postmenopausal, and it's like you're supposed to understand, like, hey, older women can still be frisky, that kind of thing. But I was too young to really take that in. But Miss Musso hit at just this right age for me, where she is a lonely, horny, 40-year-old school administrator who she's got to keep the peace and be stern, but like she's kind of jealous of the female students who are actually going all the way when she's not, like she's got her needs and everything too. And Melanie Chardoff is perfect. She's one of those like Hall of Fame pop culture characters that's underrated. That's up there with like Frank Bonner as Herb Tarlick. Like I think she deserves to be on like a commemorative plate.
Yeah, I mean, really, like everything she does, it's weird, right? Because she's ruling, Santo Domingo, you would say. She's got a well-manicured iron fist, but then she's showing this like hilarious insecurity. She's this woman trying to keep up appearances that she's in charge, but then it's almost like she sees Parker not as like a challenger to anything. He's dangerous, but he's part of the ecosystem, so I got to keep everything in check here. But she yells, she schemes, she revels in causing anxiety among her students, pushing the limits of her power to the edge. But like you said, like she's super horny. She's seeing Chippendale dancers just appear in the hallways. And this show, I will say also, is very equal opportunity. Like, yeah, there's a lot of cheerleaders in biker shorts. And I don't know what you call the tops, and same deal back in the day, you know, but they're basically like sports bras, you know, and biker shorts. But then there's always hunky guys around too. So they really do that. But like she is so funny because she likes the hunky guys, but then there's an episode where it's revealed she's a Donny Osmond stalker. And like he shows up for a cameo. She's also, like you were indicating, right? She is that classic late 80s professional woman who defined femininity for me in a big way at that time. Just petite ladies in blazers with the big shoulder pads. They're wearing skirts with the nylons, lots of makeup and jewelry. Their hair's a little teased out. Like there's just a look from that time. She is what like all teachers and like professional moms, the moms I knew that worked, you know, like that was their look. She's it.
She's 80s hot. Like she was a holdover relic by Parker Lewis, but she's like hot in a way that you could only be hot then. Like you can look back on like season 3-4 Married with Children and like the women Al would lust over, and you're like, really? But that's what was hot. Like she is quintessential Fox hot. Like if I ever stumble back in time and find myself in 1990, I'm going to the nearest singles bar and looking for her.
I mean, I do want to mention too, like in the mix, like we don't have to go through every single character, but I think Troy Slayton as Jerry is very unique in how they handle him, because he could have so easily been the Screech. He could have been the one that's a little socially awkward and everybody picks on him and he's a loser, but they keep him around so they feel better about themselves. But it's strange. He chooses to be subservient to Parker Lewis. Like that is his choice. He's like, I want to be his right-hand man. I want to be his secretary. I want to take his lunch order. Like there's an episode where he goes out of that and he hangs out with like a different guy. Well, actually, there's several episodes where, okay, now he's cool. Now he's a jock. Now he tries all these different hats on, but he always comes back to just being himself, which is, I'm friends with Parker. Parker respects me, but I also am not trying to be the leader in any way. I like playing second. Well, he's third fiddle. Mikey's second fiddle, you know? But I'm curious to get your take on Jerry, because I can't think of any other show where that has happened.
I agree with that. And I know this kind of dips a little bit into like a later section, but in my mind, if there is a fourth season and the show ends there, this whole thing is kind of like an internship for Jerry. He's learning from Parker because Parker is like the most worldly person in his life. And it's reminiscent of the same relationship from National Lampoon's Van Wilder between Van Wilder and Taj. And if you ever saw, because if there's anyone in my life who has seen it, it's gonna be you, the straight-to-video sequel, The Rise of Taj, where he assumes the Van Wilder position. He is promoted to top dog. And I feel that once Parker graduates, because keep in mind, Jerry's a freshman in the beginning, while Parker's junior at that point, I want to say. So there is some disparity there. Someone's gonna have to take over when Parker goes off to like wherever the hell he's gonna end up, you know? So that's how I see Jerry. It's like, it's a mutual respect. There are ranks, like you said, he is third fiddle, but he's taking it all in. Like at the end, he will be a more fleshed out and realized human from his interaction with Parker.
Yeah, it's a great evolution. He actually starts dating Shelley, basically. Like they're an item by the end. And for those who don't know, Shelley is the little sister from Adventures in Babysitting. And she's a great part of the cast as well. Because just her, Parker, like when she's yelling at her brother, like she's so great. She's equally as clever and scheming as Parker, and she does a great job in that. But one thing that you brought up, the show being a quintessential 90s Fox show for that time, for me, the time capsule element works so well because the jokes are dated, but in the best way. It's not a they didn't age well type of way. It's like they are of the moment, right? Like now there's a few things like, that wouldn't fly now, like the occasional joke about like ogling girls at cheerleader tryouts or girls swim team practice and they're recording it or whatever it is, got their binoculars. And you're just like, okay. But other than that, like the of the moment references in pop culture, they're going to make jokes about Belle Biv DeVoe. When are you ever going to hear about Belle Biv DeVoe again? Or that might have been the only time. Like, I don't know. Then they would just grab something that immediately had just happened. Like in season 2, there's a Terminator 2. Coob turns into, the T-800. He gets a leather jacket. He gets the glasses. There's, robotic sounds as he's walking through the hallway, that kind of stuff. Or the one that, like, I love so much is they do an episode where Jerry is addicted to video games and they show the original NES, Sega, the Atari Lynx, Tiger Electronics handheld games, and actual gameplay, like, of all those things with the sound effects. I actually did an article on Retro Days years ago about video games appearing in movies and TV shows and grabbed a bunch of screen caps from that episode. Like, they would take what was really happening and do it. And even bigger for me, what wins my heart overall just about this series going back to it is that the Parker Lewis family business is a video rental store. It's Mondo Video. The walls are covered with movie posters. It's Die Hard 2. It's Home Alone. Like, it's everything. Like, of course, for me, my eyes are just staring at all the VHS boxes on the shelves. Like, I have that. I need that. I get so excited. But just the time capsule that it all is amazing.
It definitely is. And I mean, like, on down to like the setting, the jokes, even the cast, it's full of, we mentioned it before, like a lot of people got their starts there, but then there are also a lot of people who fall into the like, I know that guy category, like Parker's dad, Timothy Stack. In my mind, Timothy Stack has had 3 roles in his life. He was Parker Lewis's dad, he was Notch Johnson on Son of the Beach, and he had Dick Dietrich's nightstand, which all of those could be mentioned in a future episode of the show. But he's definitely like, and I know that guy. And even like in the Atlas Diner, there were like waitresses and stuff where when you look at their face and then you kind of do the math, you're like, I know who that is, but of course they're uncredited because they don't have any lines, It's such a time capsule.
Yeah, they did such a great job. And honestly, like, this could be its own podcast and I could dissect every episode, every gag. The only last thing I just want to mention quickly is that The Simpsons had the couch gag, right? So what did Parker Lewis have? They had opening and closing, pre-credits, post-credits, little stingers that they would do. In the first season, at least, it would always be like opening up a refrigerator, opening up a microwave, and opening up, a soda dispenser, like in the hallway, like just all those types of different things that they would put together. And it's always super clever. It doesn't have anything to do with the episode, but just the ingenuity of that idea. I feel like it's not something that you saw all the time. In particular, like the one with the soda machine cracked me up because, every member of the cast will come in front of it and something will happen, it won't come out right or whatever. But then Kubiak just lifts up the entire machine so the whole camera goes with him and then it sprays right into his mouth. And you're just like, the mechanics of what all the directors had to do on this show is amazing. Just like the kinetic energy and the way they staged everything going on. And because it's not just like the Dutch angles on the camera, you would think there'd be a lot more like sped up film than there is in the show. There's really not a lot, but there's a ton of sound effects that make you think everything is sped up,
Definitely. They were creating a lot of just camera tricks that have probably been repeated since, but had never been done before. There was the article you sent me where they like rejoined the creators at, it was one of the anniversaries, I guess it was like 25th or something, and they were talking about one of the camera sight gags they did where Mikey throws his guitar off the top of the school, and they actually put a camera on the guitar. They were like, we need this shot of it like rushing down to the crowd. And they were like, the network was like, they're like, no, we have to put this camera on the guitar. And you see the shot and you're like, okay, yeah, it was worth it. Like,
yeah, I mean, just again, the visual language of the show and how how much they let the directors just be creative. You can really tell. And yeah, reading those interviews, listening to the commentaries, they say like, oh yeah, that we would just kind of let them do what they could with the script wherever they wanted to take it. But one person that I thought you should know, one of the directors who worked on the show quite a bit, especially the first season, was a guy named Brian Spicer, who went on to direct Mighty Morphin
Power Rangers the movie. I didn't even connect those dots.
You never know. You never know who's going to pop up behind the camera in Parker Lewis. But hey, we're laughing. We're having a good time singing its praises, but it can't last forever, right? So we're going to go from our cheers into our jeers.
Boo! Boo! Boo!
All right. What do you think, Will? Is there a criticism that you can lob at the show?
There are a few. They feel nitpicky, but there's a few. Season 2 gets a little weird to me because Parker gets a girlfriend. And I feel that Parker needs to be treated the same way Marvel looks at Peter Parker, in that he shouldn't be in a successful relationship. He should be good with women, but I don't want him tied down. And I just think there's more story potential there because, just going back to the pilot, like Mikey falls for Mia Jovovich. Parker falls for Mia Jovovich, doesn't realize Mia Jovovich is who Mikey fell for. It's like love triangle stuff, and you can only mine that so often. I'm going to need your opinion on this, but from my jumping around through episodes, I don't think Parker's girlfriend added anything. Like, from the episodes I saw, she has no personality whatsoever. She's not necessarily, like, even by 90s standards, she's not like, oh my god, she's gorgeous. She looks like the kind of girl that maybe got discovered in like a shopping mall model hunt, but she might say 2 things per episode. They're mainly to rub Parker's back. She doesn't have like any autonomy. The show wouldn't pass the Bechdel test. No,
that's the thing. She is there to be the perfect supportive girlfriend to Parker. That's all. Like, yeah, there's an episode where she gets jealous, or Parker is, attracted to another girl now, or an old girlfriend who dumped him comes back. Like, all that happens, but you never feel like Annie is like this great character. She's not funny. That's the number one thing. She doesn't add comedy to the series, and that's what slides all the way from, season 2, the end of season 2 into season 3, as the comedy starts losing its bite. And this is how I feel like in the first season, right? The buds, as they call themselves, the best buds, they are the 3 musketeers fighting against the tyranny of authority together. They're totally in sync, like literally, like they know each other's moves, they're working together. And then in season 2, they start doing stories where they're bickering with each other. They're fighting amongst themselves. You're like, wait, no. But more often than not, the culprit is girls. Mikey gets a girlfriend that takes him away from the group. Parker's all mad, but then Parker does it permanently for the rest of the series. And you're like, what are you guys doing over there in the writer's room? You're ruining this. Because I will say personally, I had a 3-man best friend situation in high school. And when one of the guys in our unit ditched the other 2 of us for a girlfriend, it was emotionally very hard. Now, it was cool for us because we actually became better friends. We're still friends to this day, but she was, to us, in our minds, a harpy from hell. Like, it was just like, no,
she Yoko'd the group.
Yeah, you broke up the group, you Yoko. Yeah, but still, the problem is allowing realistic teen angst to invade the goofy world of Parker Lewis is wrong. It's unwelcome as an audience member. Like, Mikey was the angst-ridden one of the group, and he played it so over the top, it was very melodramatic, so it was funny. He's like, oh, Park, I just, he's always talking like this. He's very Luke Perry before Luke Perry, or simultaneously with Luke Perry, but that made the show lose its charm in a lot of ways, because they just changed the dynamic so much. You say, well, I don't want things to repeat themselves, but you gotta stay on brand. You gotta stay with the characters as that we came to love. You can't change it so quickly.
Exactly. And from like a network standpoint, I could kind of see the argument for pulling off the can't lose, because I feel by season 2, Parker lost. It's like you said, it's a decline that continues through the end. There's a point, I keep going back to the same episode, even though I swear I watched more than this, but back to Dance of Romance, it stood out to me for a lot of reasons. First off, Nick, who works at Atlas Diner, is played by Paul Johansson. Had a lot of roles as like dreamy, handsome guy in the 90s, but in the like early to mid 2000s, a lot of people of our generation and slightly younger will know him as Dan Scott of Dan Scott Motors from One Tree Hill. There's a famous video clip floating around where he's waiting for his heart transplant and a dog eats it. Look it up, it's amazing. But he's one of the best TV villains of the past 50 years. Anyway, in the episode, Nick, he's so cool. Like, I don't know his whole thing, because, again, jumping around, but he's so cool that he dulls Parker's shine. Like, I'm watching that episode, and I'm kind of like, you're cooler than Parker. You have ruined the whole vibe here. Why do I care about Parker when there's a Nick? And I think that, like, audiences and even, like, the network figured that out, because Nick's gone in season 3. But that started to show, like, the chink in the armor of, like, maybe there's only so far we can go with Parker being this charming problem solver, and it becomes more of an ensemble at that point. But, like, another jeer, by the end, I feel like the ensemble is almost too big, because you've got the Buds over here, you've got Musso, and it almost seems like she has Shelley as like a Musso in training over here, and then you've got John Panette and Coob over here, and really Coob is the glue for everyone. Like, if he got hit by a bus, no one has any reason to talk to the others anymore. And it's like, it's a great ensemble, but we'll get into it in the next sequence. But like, I just think it got a little unwieldy and, like you said, lost its edge.
I will say I actually had the opposite reaction. Not that the cast wasn't big and unwieldy and separate, but that I feel what happens is it actually becomes too much about Parker, because now it's about, okay, Parker's evolution, especially the beginning of season 3, he's like, I'm going to change my style. I'm going to be an all new Parker Lewis. I'm getting a new haircut. I'm doing this. You know, there's an episode, like, I think in season 2 where he's like, I'm going to spend the night with Annie. Like, all these different things where it's like about his goals now. And he is being selfish. Whereas before, literally, he was a force that was influencing everything around him, but he wasn't always pursuing his own desires. And I felt like more and more stories were just about, what does Parker want now? What's Parker dealing with? And that bummed me out. But also, I do have to mention, you know, you're talking about the Atlas Diner. I hate the Atlas Diner. Okay.
I do too. It's not the Peach Pit. They want it to be.
They're like, this is where half the action is taking place now, most of the time. And that's the problem is, so of course I love Mondo Video. It all but disappears by season 3. I think there's like 1 or 2 episodes where it shows up, right? So that's gone. Whereas the first season was like 100% the high school or Mondo Video. That was it. And now, like, they're moving, like, if you see the parents, they're at home now. They're not at Mondo Video anymore. We should mention about the parents too. So in the pilot, they have, for the mom, you know, and she only appears really like just very briefly, is Mary Ellen Trainor, who is the 80s mom. She was the mom in Goonies. She's the mom in Monster Squad. She's in Lethal Weapon. She was just in everything. She's there for the pilot. When they go to series for the first season, they get this other lady to fill in, and she plays the mom for the first season. But second season, Mary Ellen Trainor is back, and she's not quite as wacky as the first mom, but they got who they wanted in there. But anyway, getting back to the diner. So the Atlas Diner, the reason I don't like it is because, just like you're saying with Nick being the super suave, cool, handsome guy, everything in the diner is lit like an 80s denim jeans commercial. You know, like, it's just, everything is so cool and we got to tell you about it. And like the whole vibe, it's too stark. All it is glass bricks and like chrome and like white, you know, formica on the ground. You know, there's just nothing that's interesting. The high school is colorful and the set decoration is like quirky and weird, and it becomes like this, like, meeting place for everybody. And I'm just like, no, like, I think it's the holdover of the people who grew up in the 50s, and you always had a diner you met at, just like Saved by the Bell and everything else, and they wanted it. They couldn't afford it season 1. They got a bigger budget season 2. We could build a set. And it was just like, you guys blew it. Like, you took away the charm of the series that way. So every scene that's in the Atlas Diner, I cringe. I'm just like,
See, now we've got like point counterpoint, because I kind of go the other way. Where like, well, first off, recasting the parents. In the pilot, Parker's dad is also played by this guy whose name I never remember, but I know he was in one episode of Seinfeld, and he played Lex Luthor in the syndicated Superboy series in the late 80s. And then they got Timothy Stack. So the parents, they just couldn't figure out. But going back to the Atlas Diner, I too hate the Atlas Diner, but I didn't look at it as like it was done out of desire, like for this like reminiscent like hangout from the 50s. I thought it was done out of necessity, because they probably lost access to the school. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot easier to shoot on a set than on location. Like, the fact that most of the action is confined to the diner now, that just felt like it was budgetary concerns to me.
that actually makes a lot of sense now that I think about it. I didn't put those pieces together. Yes, absolutely. So either way, that's where they went. And I will say, by season 3, they also do a lot of like outdoor shoots. Like, there's like the first few episodes are just set in the summer. So like they're set like, oh, we're outdoors doing things. There's people walking around in bikinis and like, but they're in a public park. You're like, wait, what are you doing? Like, I don't understand. And I will say also, season 3 gets really sexy. Like, it's a lot more shirtless people. It's a lot more ogling, like I think they really were trying to compete with Beverly Hills 90210, like, up the sex factor,
Well, they're getting network notes, because at this point it's 93. So you're going up against like 90210, which is still like ascending, but then you've also got to realize Zach Morris is about to graduate and go to college. You still had the residual effects of, there's been a good year and a half where Zach Morris' schemer was at the top of his game. So like, you've got some network suit who's like, okay, over on Saturday morning on NBC, they got this Gosler guy, and then like they got the Perry guy earlier on Fox. Like, we got to get some of that sex appeal in here.
Yeah. Now, the last thing I want to mention, because kind of the opposite of sex appeal for this show is what we've said about this show is like, there isn't a lot of degrading humor. Like, it's pretty respectful to all the characters, even the ones who are brought in to be like strange and odd. It's kind of like, well, everybody's strange and odd. So they treat him with respect. And Larry Kubiak, he vacillates between being a big, stupid oaf who can't stop eating to a witty and educated sophisticate, just depending on the scene. They'll just suddenly, something clicks and now he can like quote some philosopher or something like that, So that dichotomy is funny, but the jokes are at the expense of Abraham Ben Ruby, of his size, which is unfortunate. It's like, could you imagine if a large person could be smart and not always stuff their face with food? Like, fat people have feelings, and you're just like, that's stupid. Like, I hate that they have to go to that so often. Like, it's a show full of archetypes, okay? Everything is very, very heightened, but feeding him fish like a killer whale and making his catchphrase "eat now," like, it's insulting. It's not as bad as The Critic. They don't hate the character. He's beloved by everybody around him, and the writers, you can tell, have an affection for the character, but it's still very frustrating to me to see it go back and forth, because you see what he's capable of, and then they always go back to "eat now."
See? Counterpoint, because I see that, but I felt like Kubiak is written as a gentle giant. I think that Abraham Ben Ruby brought certain things to the role that weren't necessarily written into it. So it's one of those, like, he happened to be a bigger guy, so some of the weirdness could be misconstrued as fat jokes, but walk with me here. If you swapped him out and put in Richard Mall as Bull from Night Court, the jokes still work.
It's a good point. He's just a big guy, like a big
Right.
frame. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point because he is basically a force of nature. Yeah, is what he is. But then again, by season 3, he is less stupid. He is kind of like the fourth bud. Like they even say in like season 2 at some point, they're like, Larry, we consider you a friend, like, so that is definitely where they were going with it. So I can agree with that. I guess it'd be interesting to see if you could count and say, okay, so how many, jokes are him eating, a giant leg of lamb, and how many are him like playing a character now that's more along those lines as opposed to, okay, he's just so giant and he's shaking the whole school, which happened a lot, or he's roaring like Godzilla, like all those types of things are pretty much what is happening most of the time. But I mean, you do change my perception a little bit with that Richard Mole thing, and RIP Richard Mole. Will, before we get into our last segment here, I do want to ask you a question because, we talk about how much we love these characters. That's why we're passionate if they're not handled right. So the actors themselves, where have you seen them pop up in other shows where you're just like, oh, I know them for Parker Lewis?
Abraham Ben Ruby ruined ER for me.
Oh no.
like the entire, 15 years, like all those seasons, anytime he popped up, it's like, well, there he is, because I mean, like Troy Slayton did it for me too, because he did go to Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, which is one of the better known Power Ranger ripoffs, which isn't, but that's somebody's gonna jump on that. But like he played a character in the first season.
Yeah, he always stood out to me because those are my initials. So I was like, oh, he has my initials. Amp. Yeah, I can't believe it. It's Jerry from Parker Lewis.
Right. But yeah, no, like that whole season, I was like, this is great. I get to see Jerry again. And then he's replaced with a surfer guy in the second season. It's not even a second season. There's like one season, but it's like 56 episodes. So in halfway point, they're like, bye, you're going away.
I will say Abraham Ben Ruby for me as well. So he has like a 5-line cameo in The Shadow, the 1994 Alec Baldwin film, which is one of my favorites. So every time he pops up, I'm like, Coob! So like, that's very fun. But also I remember watching that Seth Green movie, Without a Paddle, which is not very good, but all of a sudden he shows up in the middle of it as like a weed farmer or something. And I'm just like, what are you doing here, Coob? All right. I know a lot of people, probably maybe even more so now, like a certain section of fandom know Corin Nemec from Stargate, the TV series. I guess he had a long running role on that, but I never watched it. I was like, I know MacGyver was on it and Parker Lewis was on it, but I have no need for that show.
It wasn't long. Like he's a fill-in character. He's on for like a season and a half. Like he probably could have stayed longer, but it was like backstage politics. I'm a big Stargate guy, and I actually hate his seasons because I can't look at him without seeing Parker Lewis. And he was an alien, so
that's hilarious. Oh man. Okay, well, hey, we saw some things in the show that were broken and we want to fix them. So we got to rush into that emergency room. We got to find out how we want to change the show to help it either get another season or how we would reboot it for today's audiences. So we are going to play Show Doctors. I looked at it and I said, okay, what was the charm of the original show that they lost as the series went on? And to me, it was a live action cartoon. It's like the same reason I love Scott Pilgrim. Like they translated a comic book idea and really put it on the screen in that way. So I think a reboot now of Parker Lewis would work well as an animated series, but in a throwback 2D animation style. So it would be a 90s love fest. I mean, it's not set in the modern day to appeal to kids of the YouTube generation. That's not what we're doing here. It's for middle-aged, retro-loving folks like us. And in particular, I think it'd be fun if they did a lot of style parodies each episode, because they would do that a lot. They'd get experimental. And so like Teen Titans Go does that a lot. We're doing doing this type of episode. We're doing this type of episode. And I think you get the production crew from Teen Titans Go. They would have the right energy for an animated Parker Lewis series, which, while aimed at kids of the 90s like us, I think the wackiness they would infuse it with would appeal to all ages. And the best part is you could easily bring in the original cast, especially Melanie Charnoff. You know, Miss Musso was the voice of Dee Dee Pickles, the mom on Rugrats, for decades. So she's got that whole history, you know, she knows how to work it. So that would be my choice, animated Parker Lewis.
Interesting. Okay. So I know we look at it two different ways, how we would have kept it going or how we would bring it back. As far as keeping it going, I wouldn't have. Like I'd said before, I think it maybe had one more season in the tank, but 3 seasons in the early 90s on Fox is a blessing. People take that for granted. One of my favorite Family Guy jokes is the cold open of the first episode after the cancellation. Because a lot of people don't, if you're not into Family Guy was canceled after its first 3 seasons. It was off the air for about 3 years, but the reruns on Adult Swim made Fox bring it back. So in the cold open, they're talking about like, well, maybe Fox will bring us back. And Peter goes into this like 30-second like list of all of the shows that would have to be canceled before Fox would make that decision. And he proceeds to list every show that Fox launched and canceled in the 3-year span between their cancellation and them coming back. And it's a lot. Like the joke is, if you end up on Fox, they pick up your show to cancel it. They really do. So like 3 seasons was enough. I loved the finale as a clip show. I thought it was fitting. I thought the show was losing steam, and it really only had like 1 more year in it because it is a time capsule and we were moving into like mid-90s and things were about to change. But to bring it back now, I would love to do that. As like a streaming series, put it on like Hulu or Netflix, probably Hulu. It's kind of inspired by Corin Nimmick and David Faustino are best friends, Bud Bundy, in real life. And about 10 years ago on Crackle, there was this web series called Starving. And it's like a mockumentary reality show, but it follows David Faustino, who is just dying to get a Married with Children reboot happening because he's broke. And Corin Nimmick is also broke because he has no Parker Lewis money left. So they run a porn shop. And like these minisodes, I think they're still on Crackle at this point. They might be on YouTube. But like these minisodes have cameos. Like Bud actually approaches Ed O'Neill and Christina Applegate and is like, come on, like I need this. Like I need this back. And they turn him down. And Corin has like no one to turn to. But like in my head, I've been thinking about that for a while because it really only had 1 season because Faustino's been really trying to do this Married with Children reboot. And this predated like when we were getting Fuller House and those things. Like we weren't in that frame of mind. So with like the ingredients of that and where TV is now, because we didn't really touch on how it was inspiring. Like the creators went on to give us Scrubs and like a lot of surreal shows that didn't work then. Like that was one of my jeers. It was ahead of its time. It's a smart show, but even today when we talk about smart shows, that's a euphemism for nobody's watching it. Arrested Development was a smart show, but it's like, why aren't you watching it? It's so intelligent. Same there. It was a Full House Roseanne world where Parker Lewis didn't fit in. But to fast forward to now, we're used to that. So back to that thought process of Parker Lewis lost. I want like Parker Lewis returns. I want us to rejoin Parker where he is now. Corin Nimmick's still in great shape. He still looks young-ish. And I want us to see Parker emerge from a bad period of his life and kind of try to recapture who he used to be. It's kind of like he's finding himself and he knows that old Parker is inside of him, but like the world has gotten in the way and life has gotten in the way and it's really rebuilding himself. And we get to see like where people are today. Where is Shelley today? I think Troy Slayton would pop in. He's a lawyer now, but like I think we could get him. Billy Jane's not doing anything, you know? And this isn't like a long-term show, especially in today's climate where Netflix will cancel you after 3 seasons anyway. This is like a 2-year commitment. And there's a little bit of like, yes, the Parker-ism in him is timeless, but he still is a man out of time. Like, this is a guy who was cool 30 years ago. So how is he cool in 2023 using what he has like carried with him through life? Like, I think Parker Lewis could win again. Parker Lewis wins. That's what we could call it. But really, like, I want to revisit him today where he hasn't been winning. He lost at some point over the last 30 years, and it's really like how Parker gets his groove back.
Okay. I mean, I can see it. That definitely feels like, again, there'd be a reason to keep bringing in all the old characters and mix them back in. It's like the people that cared about him, the people he helped now want to help him. And yeah, like all the goodwill that comes around. Because it's so easy to have like cynical comedy and like, angry comedy or whatever, but that's not what this show was. So to kind of like bring back that vibe for him in his life and then for people that watch it, I think that's a great take, if you're going to do it in live action that way. So, hey, maybe you do that and people are liking it, and then you go the animated route after the fact. You're like the previous adventures of Parker.
Right.
That kind of stuff going on. So that's great. Well, man, we could break down so many details about the show, but we got to get ready for our next one. It's kind of a sad situation that inspired our next episode, but I think it will lead to some really warm memories and excitement. And that is, you mentioned to me, Matthew Perry just passed away, like unexpectedly, suddenly. And what do we do about that, right? Like we feel like we need to celebrate this guy who was a TV icon. He was just, yes, Friends, but he was like on like every 80s sitcom as a guest star, and then he had several series, after Friends even, that he was like trying to keep going. But we decided, for our purposes, what's an obscure but truly unique and wild show that we could talk about? And this is not one, but two shows. Because let me just read this brief description on Wikipedia for you. Second Chance is an American sitcom which aired on Fox from September 26th to November 28th, 1987. The series was then revamped under the new title Boys Will Be Boys and ran in the new format from January 16th to May 14th, 1988. This is just an amazing piece of history. It talks about how networks will revamp and change, trying to get a hit. So we're going to have a lot to discuss. And the best part is the stuff is on YouTube. You guys could go find Boys Will Be Boys. You can look up Second Chance and be like, this is so 80s and you're going to love it. So go check it out, watch it, and get prepared for our December episode as we celebrate Matthew Perry and his career and this interesting, bump along the road, I guess, on his way to Friends.
All right. Well, thanks again for listening. And until next time, gentlemen, synchronize watches.
This has been a presentation of the Retro Network.